She announced, "Spent your mom's cancer treatment fund." She was dying anyway. I said, "Actually, she's in remission." Then I had her arrested for elder abuse. She got 10 years. I'm writing this a week after my life was cleaved in two, the before and the after. The before was a life of anxious hope of watching the woman I loved, my mother, fight a battle against stage 4 ovarian cancer. The after is a cold, quiet landscape of betrayal and methodical justice. For 2 years, our world has revolved around oncology appointments, chemotherapy cycles, and the terrifying quarterly PET scans. My father passed away 5 years ago, leaving behind a modest life insurance policy. I took that money, added a significant portion of my own savings, and created what we called the Lifeline Fund. It was a joint savings account holding just over $150,000. It was untouchable, sacred money earmarked for anything insurance wouldn't cover. Experimental treatments, specialized home care, alternative therapies, anything that might give my mom Eleanor another month, another year. My girlfriend of 4 years, Megan, was my rock through it all. She lived with me, helped manage the bills, and held my hand in sterile waiting rooms. I trusted her completely, so completely, in fact, that I gave her a debit card for the Lifeline account. The idea was that if an emergency came up with my mom's care while I was swamped at my engineering firm, she could handle it. It was a symbol of our partnership. Last Tuesday was the best day of my life. We were at the oncologist's office for mom's latest scan results. The doctor, a man known for his cautious realism, walked in with a smile I hadn't seen in years. "Eleanor," he said, his voice warm. "I don't know how to explain it. The tumors are gone, the markers are non-existent, you're in complete remission." We both just broke down, sobbing with a relief so profound it was physically painful. 2 years of holding our breath, and we could finally exhale. Remission wasn't a cure, but it was a future. The Lifeline Fund was now more important than ever, a security blanket for the next 5 years of monitoring, maintenance drugs, and the ever-present fear of recurrence. I drove home on a cloud of pure joy, stopping to pick up champagne and my mom's favorite pastries. I walked into the apartment I shared with Megan, ready to share the miracle with her. "Meg," I shouted, bursting through the door, "you are not going to believe this, she's in remission, complete remission." Megan was into the kitchen, she turned and the look on her face was not joy, it was not relief, it was the stark, blood-drained terror of a cornered animal. My euphoria evaporated, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. "What is it?" I asked, my voice suddenly low. "Megan, what's wrong?" She couldn't meet my eyes, she just stared at a spot on the floor, twisting her hands. "Leo, about the fund." My heart stopped. "What about the fund?" Her confession came out in a garbled, pathetic whisper. She'd started a business, an online boutique, she'd needed capital for inventory, for a website, for marketing, and she'd used the Lifeline Fund, all of it. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "You, what?" "I was going to pay it back," she insisted, finally looking at me with eyes full of self-pity, not remorse. "I was going to surprise you. The doctors, they all said she had 6 months, maybe a year. The prognosis was terrible, Leo." And then she said the words that will haunt me for the rest of my life. The words that severed any last shred of empathy I had for her. "I just thought she was dying anyway. I wanted to build something for us, for our future. I thought I could make something good out of a horrible situation." The silence that followed was thick with the magnitude of her monstrosity. She hadn't just stolen money, she had looked at the grim prognosis of the woman who had treated her like a daughter and saw a business opportunity. She had placed a bet on my mother's death. A switch flipped in my brain. The hurt, the shock, it all receded, replaced by an ice-cold crystalline clarity. "Actually, Megan," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion at all. "She's in remission." She blinked, confused. "What? But that's good, right?" "No," I said, stepping back from her, as if she were a contagion. "It's not good for you. You seem to misunderstand what that money was for. Remission isn't a finish line. That fund was for the next 5 years of scans that cost $5,000 a pop. It was for the maintenance drugs that cost $10,000 a month. It was for the very real possibility of a recurrence that would require a second, even more expensive fight. You didn't just spend the money we had for her to die peacefully, you stole her chance to live. I took my phone out of my pocket. She watched, a flicker of fear in her eyes. What are you doing? My mother is a 65-year-old cancer patient. You, a person in a position of trust, systematically stole her entire life savings under the assumption she would be dead soon. That isn't a relationship problem, Megan. That is a felony. Specifically, it's financial elder abuse. Her face went white. You can't. Leo, please. It was a mistake. We can fix this. No, we can't, I said, dialing the non-emergency police line. But the district attorney can. I told her to leave her keys and her phone, a phone that was on my family plan, on the counter, and get out of my apartment. She started to argue, then saw the look in my eyes and simply crumpled. She grabbed her purse and fled. I stood in the silent apartment, the celebratory champagne warming on the counter. Then I made the call. I reported the crime calmly and clearly. The after had begun. Update 1. The immediate aftermath was a blur of legal and administrative triage. The police were at my apartment within an hour of my call. I gave my statement, providing the account number and my initial estimate of the stolen funds. The officer was professional, but I could see the flicker of disgust in his eyes when I explained the context. He gave me a card for a detective in the financial crimes unit and told me to expect a call. The next day I was contacted by Detective Miller, a weary-looking man who'd clearly seen the worst of human nature. I also received a call from a caseworker at Adult Protective Services, APS, who had been alerted by the police report. Suddenly, I wasn't just a betrayed boyfriend. I was the primary witness in a state-level investigation. My first task was to pull every bank statement for the Lifeline Fund from the past year. What I found was nauseating. Megan hadn't taken the money in one lump sum. It was a slow, methodical bleed. It started 8 months ago, right after a particularly grim oncology report, a $10,000 withdrawal here for inventory, a $5,000 transfer there for web design, another $15,000 for a marketing consultant. She had drained over $150,000, all while smiling in my face, holding my hand, and asking how my mom was feeling. I found the business she'd created, Nova Bloom Boutique. It was a generic, soulless online store selling overpriced fast fashion jewelry. I found the invoices and receipts in her email, which I still had access to via our shared cloud account. I printed everything, organized it into a binder, and handed it over to Detective Miller. He called it a prosecutor's dream. Telling my mother was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I sat with her in her small, sunny living room and laid it all out. I expected tears or anger. Instead, her face was a mask of profound sorrow. "Oh, Leo," she whispered, taking my hand. "That poor, broken girl. I'm not sad about the money. We'll figure that out. I'm sad for you. And I'm sad for her, that her heart is so empty." Her grace was humbling. It erased any doubt I had about my course of action. I wasn't just doing this for the money. I was doing it to honor my mother's strength and to ensure the person who preyed on her vulnerability faced real, unavoidable consequences. Megan was arrested a week after my initial call. Detective Miller informed me they had picked her up at her sister's house. He said she was completely shocked, as if she genuinely believed there would be no repercussions. Then came the calls from her family. Her mother called me, screaming. She made a mistake. She's a good girl who got in over her head. You're destroying her life over money. Her mother has cancer. For God's sake, you should know better. Your daughter gambled with my mother's life, I replied calmly. The fact that you see that as a simple mistake tells me everything I need to know. Don't contact me again. The system was moving, slow but powerful. I had done my part. Now, I had to trust it to do its job. Update 2. The wheels of justice grind slowly, but they grind fine. The district attorney's office formally charged Megan with 2 felonies, grand theft and financial elder abuse. The second charge was the more serious one, carrying a significantly stiffer penalty due to the victim's age and vulnerable status. We met with the prosecutor, a sharp, empathetic woman named Ms. Chen. She walked my mother and me through the process. She made it clear that Megan's actions were not just theft, but a profound violation of trust that the state took very seriously. Megan's defense strategy quickly became apparent. Her lawyer, a public defender, was attempting to frame the entire situation as a domestic dispute, a business deal between a couple that went sour. They claimed I was a controlling partner who had initially agreed to invest in her business, but then turned on her after we broke up, using the elder abuse statute as a weapon. They argued that because it was a joint account, she had a legal right to access the funds. It was a weak, desperate argument, and Ms. Chen dismantled it with precision. First, the joint account. While Megan had access, the prosecution subpoenaed texts and emails between us where the purpose of the fund was explicitly and repeatedly discussed. I had dozens of messages saying things like, "Just transferred another $5 to the Lifeline Fund for Mom's next treatment." The intent of the money was clearly documented. Second, the elder abuse. The victim was not me, but my mother. The funds were established for her sole benefit. Megan used her position of trust as my partner and as a surrogate daughter to my mother to gain access to and exploit those funds. The most damning piece of evidence was the timeline. Ms. Chen's team created a large chart for the preliminary hearing. On one side, it listed my mother's oncology reports. Prognosis worsens. New growth detected. On the other side, it listed Megan's withdrawals. $10,000 for Nova Bloom LLC. $7,500 for marketing. Every time my mother's health declined, Megan's spending accelerated. She wasn't just stealing, she was liquidating assets based on a death watch. The DA offered her a plea deal. Plead guilty to both charges and they would recommend a sentence of 4 years. According to Ms. Chen, Megan refused it without a moment's hesitation. She was still convinced she was the victim. She believed she could walk into a courtroom, cry, and convince a jury that she was just an ambitious young woman with a broken heart. It was the most profound miscalculation of her life. Final update. The trial lasted 3 days. It was the most emotionally draining experience of my life. My mother had to testify. Seeing her on the stand, frail from her treatments but with a spine of steel, was both heartbreaking and inspiring. She didn't speak with anger, only with a quiet sadness. She described how Megan was like a daughter to her and what that money, that hope had meant. When I took the stand, I simply recounted the facts. I told them about the day of the good news. I repeated Megan's exact words. She was dying anyway. I saw a few of the jurors physically flinch. Megan's testimony was a catastrophe. She tried to portray herself as a savvy, well-intentioned partner. Under cross-examination from Ms. Chen, her story crumbled. She couldn't explain the damning timeline. She couldn't produce a business plan or any evidence that I had agreed to an investment. She came off as callous, evasive, and profoundly self-absorbed. She cried on the stand, but her tears seemed to be for herself, not for the immense harm she had caused. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. The verdict was guilty on all counts. The sentencing was 2 weeks later. The courtroom was silent as the judge addressed Megan. He was an older man and he looked at her not with anger but with a kind of weary contempt. "Ms. Gable," he began, his voice echoing in the chamber. "In my 20 years on this bench, I have seen many kinds of theft born of desperation, addiction, or greed. But your crime is of a different, more chilling nature. You did not just steal money. You stole hope from a woman in the most vulnerable state of her life. You looked at a countdown to a person's death and saw it as a business deadline. This was not a mistake. This was a predatory act of profound moral depravity." He then delivered the sentence. For the charge of grand theft, 5 years. For the charge of financial elder abuse, 10 years to be served concurrently. A sharp gasp came from Megan's family. She just stared blankly as if she couldn't process the words. 10 years. I walked out of the courtroom with my arm around my mother. There was no joy, no sense of victory. Just a quiet, somber sense of an ending. Justice had been done. It has been nearly a year since that day. Megan is in a state correctional facility. The boutique, of course, failed spectacularly. What little money was left in its accounts was seized for restitution. But it was a pittance. I never saw a significant portion of the money again. I have been working double time and friends and family helped and we have slowly started to rebuild the Lifeline Fund. My mother remains in remission. Her health is good. That is the only victory that matters. People have asked me if I regret having her arrested, if I should have just handled it myself. My answer is always the same. What Megan did wasn't a personal slight. It was a crime. A serious, calculated crime against a vulnerable person. I didn't have her arrested. I reported a crime and the justice system, for all its flaws, did its job. She wasn't sentenced by me. She was sentenced by her own actions. She got exactly what she deserved. 10 years.